We looked up at the stars. We saw them through a veil of our own making, a glittering cage of broken things. Satellites and spent rocket stages tumbled in the dark. They were ghosts of our forgotten ambitions. Each glint of sunlight on metal was a memory of a time we reached for the heavens. Now the heavens were just a scrapyard. Our sky was a prison built from our own progress. Every launch added more bars to the cage. We had climbed so high so fast, we never thought to clean up after ourselves. Now we were trapped beneath a dome of debris. The Kessler syndrome was no longer a theory. It was the hard ceiling above our world. Travel between planets became a deadly gamble. Sending probes into the deep dark was impossible. We were grounded. We were a species confined to our cradle. The dreams of starflight died. They were replaced by the quiet dread of isolation. We could only look up at the junk we made. We had filled our world with noise. We filled our sky with silence and rust. It was a monument to our cleverness and a testament to our lack of wisdom. Our greatest achievement had become our final trap. We were a people living under a glass ceiling, a ceiling we had shattered ourselves. Then a voice spoke from the void. It was not human. It cut through the static of our orbital mess. The signal was impossibly ancient and powerful. It did not ask for permission to speak. It simply arrived everywhere at once. On every screen, in every speaker, in every mind. The voice was not made of words. It was made of pure meaning. It felt like cool water on a fevered brain. It showed us images of swirling galaxies. It showed us the birth and death of suns. It showed us a universe teeming with life. A universe we were meant to join. The message was simple and devastatingly clear. It called us children, lost children playing in our own mess. It acknowledged our potential, our bright, brief spark. But it also saw our self-inflicted prison. It saw the cage of trash we had built. It saw a species that had fouled its own path. We were being watched by minds as old as starlight. They had seen countless worlds rise and fall. They were the silent gardeners of the cosmos, and they had finally turned their attention to us. The initial shock turned to a global, breathless awe. We were not alone, but we were in trouble. Their judgment came without ceremony. There was no trial, no appeal. The star-born minds delivered their verdict with silence. They showed us their ships for the first time, vast, silent shapes that blotted out the stars. They had been watching us from the darkness, observing our slow, steady self-imprisonment. Their conclusion was logical and cold. We were a failed experiment, a species with great promise that had choked on its own growth. We were deemed unworthy of contact. We were too reckless, too short-sighted, a danger to ourselves and perhaps to others. We were a quarantine case. The great ships turned away. They did not fire a weapon or utter a threat. They simply left. They ghosted back into the interstellar dark. Their departure was the loudest thing we had ever heard. It was a silence that screamed our failure across the solar system. We were left behind, alone again, but now with the certain knowledge of what we had lost. The universe was a grand conversation, and we had been politely uninvited. The weight of that cosmic rejection was crushing. Humanity's spirit, once aimed at the stars, fell back to Earth. It shattered. Then one person spoke up. Her name was Aris. She was an orbital architect. She offered a wild, impossible idea. Her voice was a single candle in a hurricane of despair. People called her mad. Her plan was not logical. It was an act of pure, stubborn defiance. She stood before the World Council. She said we should not clean our sky. Not yet. Cleaning was an admission of guilt. It was janitorial work. She said we should not beg for another chance. We should build our response. We would not tidy our mess. We would transform it. Her proposal was breathtakingly audacious. We would gather the debris. We would collect every last dead satellite, every forgotten booster, every shard of metal. And with it, we would build something new. A structure in orbit unlike anything ever conceived. A monument made from our mistakes. Many leaders laughed. The resources needed were immense. The engineering was beyond our current abilities. They said it was a poet's dream, not a practical solution. But the idea took root in the public mind. A mad dream was better than no dream at all. It was a chance to answer the silence with a shout. The world began to move. It started not with governments, but with people. A wave of support for the mad architect swelled. For the first time in centuries, we were united. Not by fear, but by a shared, impossible project. The great gathering began. We would forge hope from the ghosts of our past. We sent up the tugs, broad-shouldered, patient machines. They were fitted with powerful magnetic nets and grappling arms. Their job was to hunt the ghosts in our sky, to collect the fragments of our history. The work was slow and incredibly dangerous, but it had begun. Every piece had a story, a faded flag on a first-generation space station, the scorched hull of a Mars lander that never made it, communication satellites that had carried the words of billions. We gathered them all. We treated them not as trash, but as relics, as the sacred bones of our ancestors' dreams. Nations set aside their old grievances. The orbital lanes were a shared problem. This mad project was a shared solution. We built foundries in zero gravity, great forges that would melt down the past. We would recast our failures into something new, something strong, something that would last. It was the largest recycling project in human history. The first girders of defiance were laid, high above the blue curve of the Earth. Robotic arms, guided by human hands, began their work. They welded the recycled metal under the harsh sun. Sparks flew in the vacuum, silent and brilliant. Our testament was taking shape above us, a skeleton of hope against the black. From the ground, you could see it if you knew where to look. A tiny flicker of light that was not a star. It was the fire of our own forges, the glow of our unified will. We were no longer just looking at our prison. We were dismantling it, piece by piece, and using the bars to build a ladder. The structure grew with astonishing speed. It did not look like a ship or a station. It was more elegant, more strange. It had spires and arches. It resembled an ancient cathedral, a place of worship floating in the heavens, a declaration written in steel and regret. We called it the Cathedral of Second Chances. Some called it Aris's Folly, but everyone watched it grow. Every new girder was a victory. Every completed section was a verse in a new story, a story we were writing ourselves. We were answering the void silence with the roar of construction. But whispers of doubt started on Earth. Fear is a weed that grows in any soil. Many called the project a foolish gesture, a grand, empty spectacle for an audience that had already left. They claimed our monument was a waste, a drain on resources we needed to solve problems on the ground. Pundits filled the airwaves with skepticism. They called it the ultimate vanity project, polishing our trash while the world suffered. Was this really the best use of our energy? Our unity? Some said it was an insult to the star-born minds. A child playing with blocks to get attention. They argued we should be humble, not defiant. The cost was staggering. The sheer amount of energy and material was immense. Factions began to form again. The old lines of nation and ideology began to reappear. The unity that had launched the project started to fray. The whispers grew louder, from doubt to dissent, from dissent to protest. On the ground, the great work became a symbol of division. But in orbit, the work continued. The builders, a new generation of pioneers, saw it differently. They were not building a monument to ego. They were building a bridge. They believed that what you build is what you are. And humanity was more than just its mess. Then came the day of the first spire. It was the highest point of the cathedral, a long, elegant needle of repurposed steel. As the earth turned, the spire caught the first light of dawn. It blazed like a man-made star, a brilliant point of light in the pre-dawn sky. It was visible to the naked eye. A new star had appeared in our night. It did not twinkle like the distant suns. It shone with a steady, defiant glow. It was a beacon made of junk, a lighthouse built from our shipwrecks, and it outshone the distant planets. On Earth, the whispers of doubt quieted. People came out of their homes to see it. They looked up at this new light in their sky. It was not just a construction project anymore. It was real. It was beautiful. It was ours. The sight of it stirred something ancient in the human heart. The cathedral became a part of our world, a promise hanging in the sky. Children pointed at it before they could name the constellations. It was a reminder of what we could do when we worked together. The project's momentum became unstoppable. It was fueled now not just by defiance, but by awe. The watchers turned their gaze back to us. The silent ships returned. They appeared at the edge of the system without warning, the same vast, dark shapes from before. They did not enter orbit. They just hung there, in the deep black beyond Saturn. Their presence was a cold weight on our souls. They did not communicate. They did not interfere. They simply watched. Their sensors, impossibly advanced, were pointed at our project, at the strange cathedral we were building from scrap. The tension was immense. Were they curious? Were they impressed? Or were they preparing to erase our foolish gesture from the sky? On Earth, panic began to set in. The return of the star-born minds was terrifying. Had we provoked them with our audacity? Was this the end? Work on the cathedral accelerated. A frantic energy seized the project. We had to finish it. We had to show them what we meant before they made their final judgment. Eris, the architect, addressed the world. She urged calm. She said this was not a confrontation. It was a conversation. We had been silent after their verdict. Now we were speaking, not with words, but with action. The cathedral was our first sentence, and we were about to deliver the most important part. We prepared to install the cathedral's heart. The work continued under their silent, unnerving gaze. Every weld, every maneuver, was performed for an audience of ancient gods. We did not know if this was our final act, but we would act with purpose. We would finish what we started. We moved the core into place. It was the heart of our great work, a massive sphere of polished, layered composites. It took a fleet of tugs to guide it through the cathedral's arches. It settled into the central chamber with a quiet click. It was the final, most critical piece of the puzzle. The core was not a weapon. It had no destructive capability. It was not an engine to move our station. It was a voice, a broadcaster of immense power and subtlety. It was designed to transmit not simple data, but complex concepts. ideas that could not be contained in mathematics or language. Its power source was novel. It drew energy from the very debris field we had cleared. It converted the chaotic orbital mechanics, the random tumbles and spins of leftover junk, into usable power. It was a heart that fed on the memory of our mistakes. A rather poetic solution, we thought, probably lost on the giant space squids watching us. We connected the final systems. The core came online. A soft, internal light began to pulse from within the sphere. The cathedral was no longer a silent steel skeleton. It was alive, ready to speak, ready to send our message into the great dark. Our answer to the silence was finally ready. We began the broadcast. We did not send equations or star charts. We did not send the schematics of our DNA. The star-born minds already knew all of that. They had judged our science and found it wanting. So we sent them the one thing they could not have measured from a distance. We sent them our soul. We broadcasted our art, the symphonies of Beethoven and the blues of the Delta, the sculptures of Michelangelo and the cave paintings of Lascaux. We sent the plays of Shakespeare and the poetry of Li Bai. We sent everything, the soaring triumphs and the quiet sorrows of our species. It was a symphony of our art, our history, our dreams. We sent the sound of a child's laughter, the feeling of sunlight on skin after a long winter, the quiet comfort of a shared meal. We figured out how to translate raw human emotion into the signal. The core resonated with love, with grief, with rage, and with courage. It was the unfiltered, chaotic song of humanity. We hid nothing. We showed them our wars and our peace, our kindness and our cruelty, our wisdom and our folly. It was a messy, contradictory, and deeply honest message. It was not an excuse for our failures. It was the context for them. This is who we are, we said. This is what we are made of. This is why we fill our sky with junk. Because we are always reaching, even when we stumble. The signal went out. A focused beam of pure humanity. It crossed the distance to the silent ships. We had said all we could say. We had built our argument from steel and scrap. We had composed our plea from music and memory. Now, all we could do was wait for their reply. The star-born minds received our broadcast. They heard our chaotic, beautiful song. For them, it must have been a blast of pure noise. We learned later that most intelligent species communicate with mathematics, with the clean, cold logic of the universe. Our message was the opposite of that. It was a beautiful, alien cacophony to them, a flood of illogical, emotional, and contradictory data. They saw a species that could create breathtaking art, and then use that same creativity to destroy itself. They saw beings who could feel profound love, and also profound, senseless hatred. Our broadcast did not compute. We monitored their ships for a response. For days, there was nothing. Just the same silent observation. The dread returned. Had we failed? Had we simply confirmed their assessment of us as chaotic primitives? Perhaps our strange symphony was just noise to their ancient ears. A final, useless scream before being ignored forever. Then, a signal came back. It was not a verdict. It was not a dismissal. It was a single, simple transmission. It cut through the tension like a knife. The star-born minds, the silent judges of the cosmos, were confused. And their confusion was the most hopeful sign we could have imagined. They did not understand us. And for the first time, they seemed to want to. Their reply was not dismissal. It was a single question, a question that showed they had been listening. Really listening. They had analyzed the blizzard of emotional data we had sent. They had sorted through the music, the art, the history. And they had isolated the one concept that appeared again and again, the one illogical feeling that underpinned everything we did. Their question appeared on our screens, translated from pure concept into our many languages. It was simple. Define hope. That was it. No preamble, no judgment. Just a question. They asked us to explain this strange, stubborn feeling. The feeling that had driven us to build a cathedral from our own garbage. Hope was not a logical constant. It could not be described with mathematics. It was the belief in a better future, even against all evidence. It was the engine of our illogical defiance. It was the architect's mad dream. It was the welder's spark in the dark. It was the reason we sent the message in the first place. We realized then what our cathedral truly was. It was the physical definition of hope. We had built our answer before they even asked the question. The act of building it, of turning our greatest failure into our greatest statement, was the only definition that mattered. We did not need to send another word. We just had to point to the sky. Our monument became a bridge between worlds. The great ships of the star-born minds moved closer. They did not land. They did not reveal themselves. But they began to speak. The dialogue was slow, careful. Two vastly different forms of intelligence trying to understand one another. Our cathedral became an embassy of second chances. We learned much from them, about the universe, about star science, about life itself. But they, in turn, learned from us. They were fascinated by our chaos, our ability to create beauty from pain, our illogical, unbreakable resilience. They had seen countless species rise and fall, but they had never seen one turn its own trash into an olive branch. We proved that failure is not an end. It is just raw material for the next attempt. Our orbital prison became our key to the cosmos. The junk that had trapped us became the very thing that set us free. It was a lesson the ancient, logical minds of the void had never considered. Sometimes, the most beautiful things are built from the most broken pieces. We became a strange sort of legend in the star lanes. The messy children, the architects of garbage, the species that answered a verdict of failure with a symphony. It was a reputation we were surprisingly proud of. It beat being known as the species that trapped itself. Though that was also true, we are no longer trapped by our past. The sky is clearer now, not because we cleaned it all away, but because we gathered our mistakes. We gave them purpose. The cathedral still hangs above us, a constant reminder of our failure and our redemption. A star made of second chances. We are now the architects of echoes. We take the broken things, the silent histories, and we give them a new voice, a new purpose. We have learned to speak the language of hope. It is a language built from action, not just words. And it is a language the universe is finally ready to hear. The great conversation has begun. We have a seat at the table, a seat we built for ourselves out of scrap metal and stubborn pride. The stars no longer feel like a distant, impossible dream. They feel like a neighborhood. And we are finally ready to step outside and meet the neighbors. We are ready to speak with the universe.